before open up the question to the floor, I have one or two questions to our gentleman sitting next to us. One question from Santeri. You mentioned about jump lift, right?
Yep.
And what kind of building will be most suitable to use jump lift?
Thank you, Vincent, for a very good question. So the question was that what is the most suitable for the jump lift? So I think the key is there that early involvement. That's the key, because we are part of the logistical chain of your project, and a discussion with the customer in early is important. And I think the best solutions when looking at the cases what we have delivered globally is that it's a combination of jump lift, their construction time use, elevators and external hoist. So it's a combination of those. But when considering what is the most suitable, maybe those cases where the external elevator is very difficult to attach. For example, we have done it in Turning Torso in Malmo, which is this kind of corkscrew type of building outside, or Marina Bay Sands, which is very difficult, or limited opportunities to put external elevators. So maybe those kind of cases are most suitable.
Could jump lift be reused as an office lift after construction?
We have also studied that. So as there's a great variety of the shaft sizes in the buildings, so that's of course creates one challenge of the parts. Certain components are easier to recycle than the other ones, but then it's good to also remember that irreversible logistic and safety inspections and so on so need to be taken into account. It seems that the volume is so low at the moment that and project timings are different, so it's quite challenging. But for sure, it's something that we look forward in the future as well.
One question to James,
Yes.
my fans in the elevators. You mentioned about the stack effect in the Kingdom Tower because of the height and the temperature difference. When how you encounter this design problem due to height and temperature?
That's a good question. We, as I alluded to in my talk, the temperature differential in Saudi Arabia or Dubai is about 15 degrees. In other words, 15 degrees cooler at the top of the building than it is at the bottom during the hot summer days. So we concluded very quickly there's no way you can handle stack effect and have open hoistways. Or the standard practice for building codes for many, many years have been to have 3 square feet or 0.1 square meters of open space to the outside air at the top of the hoistway, and that's to prevent what we call a ball fire. The reality is in modern buildings, it used to be that all the elevator rails were greased and all the grease would end up in the bottom of the pit, and then they would be dirty and have rags down there. Somebody throw a cigarette in the pit and then you'd have a fire in the hoistway. Well, obviously we don't have grease in the hoistways anymore, so we concluded, as we did in Burj Khalifa, that the building's fully sprinkled, and we just simply put a sprinkler head at the top of each elevator hoistway and eliminate the hoistway vents entirely, even though that's probably not permitted in the U.S. with our codes, but it was certainly acceptable in Dubai and works quite well.
Thank you very much. On the floor, any question on the floor? Yes.
Johannes de Jong from Elevating Studio. Question to Mr. Pilzer. Sabbath control. You talked about usage of technology being allowed slowly also for Sabbath control. Have you considered the use of long-range RFID to make it much easier for people not to need switches and then still get service to exactly where they need it?
Once again, long range?
Long-range RFID. Long-range frequency, identification, where you can, in principle, have programmed, for example, especially for residentials, that if you are at the ground floor, it will bring you straight to your flat, doesn't need to stop in between, and it can take you straight down when you're at your flat going downwards. So it depends on location, and it can automatically bring you exactly where it wants you. So then you would not have to make all those stops, or is that mandatory that it stops on every floor?
If I understand the question correctly, is this on? Yeah.
Yeah.
The answer would be no, and that is because the RFID would in fact involve some kind of electrical circuitry. In other words, it would identify the person through electronic means, and that would be unacceptable as a matter of Sabbath observance.
Okay, so identification is not allowed.
What?
Identification then is not allowed.
Identification of that sort is not allowed. Now, previously, and I didn't expand upon this in the presentation, but when there was a non-Jew operating the elevator, he typically recognized the people coming into the residential building, and he knew what floors to take them to without their having to request the matter, and that's the way it operated. It's possible now, rather than having, and it's even typical in buildings with a small minority of Sabbath observers, to simply have the elevator stop at only those floors that have the Sabbath observers living on those floors, and then taking them to the lobby or to another desired location.
Okay. So the critical part, if I understand correct, would be the recognition of the person. So if that, electronically, that's not allowed.
Correct.
Okay.
Maybe I have one more question on the Santeri. You know, now the elevator speed is getting faster and faster, 10 meter, 12 meter, 15 meter. Will there be any limit on the speed?
If I may, so, okay, I'm an engineer and technology is very close to my heart, so I think that technologically the boundary is easy to push, even quite high numbers, but we should not forget the human inside the elevator, so I think that's setting the limits at the moment.
Safety, still important.
Yeah.
You want to add anything? James, you want on the speed? No. On the Kingdom Tower, I saw you have a lot of resi project. Is the residential unit, they all go straight up, or also with a shuttle? They take a shuttle elevator and then transfer?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we have numerous shuttles that take you up, and the beauty of shuttles, if you don't know anything about high-rise buildings, is I mentioned Frank Lloyd Wright's building. They didn't know what sky lobbies were all about, and the beauty of shuttles is now you can stack locals on top of the locals down below, so you save tremendous amount of space in the building by having a series of sky lobby shuttles and then locals that carry you on up.
And also, you mentioned that the travel distance is something like 500 meters. Is it are there any limit in the routes? Say for the local elevator, do they have a maximum distance that they can travel, or the service elevator?
Yeah, the service elevators. Yeah, we go about
Do
half.
they have a limit?
Yeah.
Do they have a limit?
The limit right now is for roped elevators, not the ultra rope, but roped elevators about 550 meters to 600 meters. And it becomes diminishing returns because like we were doing the modernization of the World Trade Centers here before their demise, and those shuttle cars were 10,000 pounds at 1,600 foot a minute, which are the biggest cars I've ever seen. They were like, carry 50 people at a time, but each one of them had anywhere from 11 to 12 3/4 inch or 1 inch hoist ropes on it. You imagine what the weight of all that is over the side. So, in fact, Otis had developed their largest DC machine ever, the 312 machines for that particular project. The other thing that was interesting about the World Trade Centers is the elevators were designed originally for 25,000 people in each tower. And they had actually written into the leases that you couldn't have densities over 130 square feet per person or 13 square meters per person. We did an actual survey to figure out how many elevators we really needed to modernize, and there was only like 10 to 12,000 people in each tower compared to what the design was. So the building was extremely over elevated based on those standards. So it was interesting to hear the developers today talk about densities are increasing, and they are, because for years, we've always tracked the BOMA building exchange reports throughout the United States. And so that actually in the World Trade Center, that works out to about, rather than 130 square feet per person, it worked out about 220 to 250 square feet per person, which a lot of the main cities and downtown areas were reporting numbers like that as actual populations. But now we notice the trend reversing as the building market gets tighter and people put more people in spaces. It's probably back down to 180 or 170, something like that. So we're actually going in reverse as far as densities in office buildings in the United States, which is interesting statistics, I think.
Thank you. Any more questions on the floor? If not, I think let's give a good hand to our very good speaker here.